folks. Welcome to another episode of the Launch Sequence Podcast. We're here for episode 102 for our weekly stop-in on Star Citizen and space game news. And this week, talking to Execute and the AstroHistorian, aka all three brought together, the Info Runners. It's like a very normal panel. Many of you have heard it before. We like to do these whenever ships are coming out, so I thought I'd bring the guys on and we could talk about the new stuff coming with Invictus week. How are you guys doing?
I'm having
it's Invictus, so it's stressful, and then yeah, but surviving. I'll just put it that way.
It's like we're on the school bus, went off the bridge, down the waterfall, through the ravine, down through the volcano, out the other side of the Earth, across space, and crashed into Pluto. Yeah.
Yes.
Invictus week
we're still alive.
it is a exciting time. It's also a pretty crazy time if you're trying to make content and stream and talk about it. So you guys, I'm sure, are pretty busy this week.
Yeah.
Very.
Cool. Well, today I'm going to start you off by stealing some of your time away from that busy schedule so we can talk about all the stuff coming to Invictus week. We've got the Fury, the Lynx, and the Storm. And we've also just got a interesting setup overall. So we'll kind of start talking with those ships and move on from there to talk about kind of what this Invictus week is telling us about Star Citizen going forward. So I'll open it up. Open table. What do you guys think of the Fury so far from Mirai?
The Fury is good. In some cases, it has its place. It's not necessarily a terrible fighter. It's a swarm fighter. It's designed as a swarm fighter.
How realistic do you think swarming is going to be in this game?
I think it's going to be pretty high. The problem is that you have to have people to have a swarm fighter.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have, people took a look at that like the Fury's just spilling out of the front of the Idris, and we're like, oh my god, it's like if you have 12 Furies and an Idris spilling out of the front, you're gonna have 12 people piloting it. And so that's the real difference, is that this is something for organizations or small groups when they want to have just overwhelming force. I've flown like a Merlin while people were working in a constellation, and a Merlin is a great force multiplier because it's so small. You don't want to pay attention to it because the real threat is the Connie. But if you don't pay attention to the Merlin, then the Merlin will knock down your shields and do other things like that. So there is a place for it as kind of an annoyance fighter. Mm-hmm. But just like the Merlin, you cough the wrong way towards the Fury and it just explodes or becomes unusable.
Yeah,
and that's really its problem.
So one thing nobody I've heard discuss, and it only really kind of came to me while you were talking there, is no one's talked about NPCs in these things. So you could hire a bunch of NPCs and just put them in and send them in,
but you
giving a shit.
They just said the other day that NPCs won't be able to fly ships for you.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Really? Okay.
They'll be able to. They might be able to fly ships like your large ships while you're commanding them, but they won't be able to fly fighters for you. So
okay, so that's a change from what they said back in the past.
Yeah.
Okay.
They've always said that, to be fair, they've always been kind of iffy on that. They said that maybe you can hire an escort, but like having your own ships to fly, they were like, yeah, we don't really like that.
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, if you had one person, if they could follow you, that would be okay. So you could have one person go in and then everyone else is like NPCs. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But yeah, if that's what they've said, then that's changed it quite drastically. Because a lot of people are really scared of death of a spaceman, you see. So if you're going in a small ship like that, you're obviously putting yourself at risk, and people are not going to want to do that.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, Death of a Spaceman is meant to stop people from making dumb decisions, and there are going to be ways to avoid dying in a ship like this. But on the mass level, when we're talking about casual players jumping in for a couple of weeks as opposed to somebody who's long term, is this something that's realistic if you can die so quickly?
Well,
it's a risky move. That's the thing.
Yeah,
it's a calculated risk. Just like having a Merlin pilot, it's a calculated risk. There's things you can do with it which will be fine, because it's powerful in terms of its loadout. Its pure loadout is very good. Even the MX is pretty good when it comes to just overwhelming numbers of like missiles and such, but you have to be part of a larger group. You cannot do this solo. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, I'm just going to buy this. And it's like, no, you're not going to, you will get absolutely dominated by the dedicated light fighters, which are better at what they do. This is just, it's a midget fighter. It's a snub fighter.
I've got a lot of negatives about this ship. So I like when we recorded our episodes, I talked about a lot of it, but there's so many things, like the fact that it's $5 more than an Aurora with a package and an LN. Like, how many new people are going to accidentally upgrade into this, you know, for $5?
Yeah.
And
I wonder if they'll
and
block that somehow.
they should.
They should.
They really should. Because it's no problem if you can go up above the Aurora, but I don't think they should allow people to go from a starter package to this, because it's just, you lose your package and all that stuff. It's not a good idea.
Yeah, and there's no quantum drive.
Well, that's why one of the reasons I said I thought it was going to come out at $40, and I was really not getting it. We can get into that later about how overpriced I think this thing is, but that it's just so negative. I didn't have a lot of. Well, you were with me when we talked about it yesterday. I didn't not have a lot of positive things to say, as did yourself.
I like the ship. I just don't like the set.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. I just don't like the price.
So, what do you guys think of this as a potential escort fighter for Hull series ships?
For sure. I think this is. I mean, if you can attach one of these to the cargo grid of a Hull.
Did you see what Algrid found, Paul? I think it's really poignant you hear this piece of information. So he went back
it's the Hull D one? Is it the Hull D?
No, Hull
Q&A?
He went to the Hull A Q&A, and inside the Hull Q&A, they were talking about making a micro fighter to work with the Hull series, is what he found. And this is clearly probably most likely what this is.
Or at least they kept from that idea.
I just want to know, how are they going to, like, I would expect a hangar in the back or something, but how are they going to package it up with those ships?
I don't think it's a hangar, and the more, like, now you've said that thing about the AI, and the more time I've spent to mull it over, I think this is a turret. I think this is a flying turret. I think it is designed to be a turret that just happens to be able to detach. So it's also like an escape pod / detachable turret, and in a pinch you can leave and chase things down, or leave and flee, right? Because again, if you think about the swarm fighter mentality, the more, and you apply Death of a Spaceman to that, it just doesn't work.
In order for it to be,
why would you put yourself in this? You'd have to be desperate.
A turret, though, it would need a back entrance, right?
No, not necessarily, because it's got attachments at the back. If they can just turn around, then you can get in. You know, so one of the things we did on episode, we actually had it so we mounted it. We got someone to do the models for us, but we got them to remove all the fuel pods off the Starfarer and kind of used it as the gantry, as the entry point, so you can actually turn around, face the ship towards the gantry, get in, and then turn around, and then it works as turrets on the back of the Starfarer. But that's the big question I had for this: is what is the bosun? You translate mothership to Japanese, it's bosen. You know, bow meaning mother, and ship meaning
everything from a cutlass to an 890. It seems.
What is the bosun?
What is the
reference?
So bosun is mothership. What is the mother? So what is this attached to?
Because
every snub in the game attaches to something.
But it's because the Mirai name is Japanese, and so bosun is mothership in Japanese.
So you think you think that there may be a separate ship or some other unannounced feature that is out there that is the mothership of this ship?
Yeah, and I use the Starfarer, as the concept for that. But I think like, if you think about where Mirai is, we've also seen the Starfarer G worked with Misk and Aegis before, so I could see them working with a more military manufacturer. Well, now they've got Mirai; they don't need a military manufacturer, you know. So they could have some kind of weapons platform that is like, even if it's the most basic level, it is, you know, 4 normal Furies in the corners, and then the MXs in the middle, and it's just a quantum drive that moves all the fighters there, and they all deploy. Or
so do you guys?
And now you've said what you've said, though. Like, I'm more convinced that there's something that this has got to work with, because you don't want to send this thing out because it's going to die.
Well, let's talk more about that. How do you guys think that Mirai is going to expand as a brand? Do you think they're going to add ships to this like they're adding to the other major ones? Is this going to be more like a Kruger, where they've got one ship in there, and 1 or 2 ships in there basically good? Or what do you think?
Oh, I think they're going to go crazy with it, because like the thing about it is that Misk is like culturally sort of mostly Japanese, but kind of has a bit of a like lore has a bit of like, you know, South Korean, a little bit of Chinese, a little bit like Hong Kong, Taiwan. It is a little bit of those sorts of cultural influences sprinkled in through it, though it's mostly heavily Japanese. And like that's one of the problems with the game versus the lore right now is that the lore is like this entire universe is this big multicultural universe, and it's like everything is just for some reason sounds like it's from Northern England, you know, and so we don't really have a lot of, you know, diversity of architecture styles or even designs. And so this is one of those things where they can really lean into that sort of, you know, aesthetic into the game. And that's obviously what they wanted to do because they wanted to make the Fury. So they're like, oh, well, this wouldn't work, but we really like the aesthetic. And if you look at it, take one look at it, this thing screams anime. Like people talk about how it's like TIE Fighter-esque.
Gundam
like,
style.
Yeah, it's like the glass cockpit, the sharp lines, like the smooth surfaces with sharp lines, like the actual like body of the Fury is a bullet. It's just a bullet, but with like wings. It's almost artistic in the sense that it's like it's supposed to be a bullet fired from a gun. It literally is shaped like a bullet fired from a gun. Like that's the kind of it's got that sort of flavor to it. And I think CIG wants to do more different things with Misk, but they can't because they put themselves in the corner of it being just an industrial manufacturer.
Mm-hmm.
So this is them. Like I wouldn't be surprised if we saw new, like, you know, I'm going to say the word that gets everyone excited, but it shouldn't really do, which is Titan suits. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Titan suits from Misk in the Mirai brand. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw ground vehicles from the Mirai brand. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw, you know, the sky's the limit at this point with the Mirai. You know, combat, you could get you know, anything that's non-industrial, a medical ship from Mirai. You could really do anything with it. Now, I don't think that'll happen right away, but I do think it'll be something they'll go in over time. Now that they have the Fury, they have the Mirai style, but it can be, because it's the nature of Mirai, it could be anything. It's like it's like Consolidated Outland. You can just throw whatever you want into it, and it works.
Yeah,
really removed the shackles of Misk, hasn't it?
That's what I was going to ask. Is every company's kind of got their tail design wise? Like Anvil's got the circle on top. Argo's got their orange with the floodlight style. Misk has chrome. Origin has like really clean white everything. What do you guys think will be the thing that they take from the Fury and kind of transfer over to all the other ships in Mirai?
Saying to you guys before the show, I see them almost like the Borg. They're this alien hybrid brand, and I think it's going to be a really popular brand because of that. Like alien ships are really popular, but like you already see it in the Fury. Like you've got these engines that are, you know, like literally almost like ripped off the Cartwheel, but then it's got human thrusters because they don't know how they work. So they've had to compensate with thrusters. And I kind of like that. I like this hybrid analogy of it. And it's actually more appealing to me than an alien ship. I actually think it's quickly going to become some people's favorite brand. But yeah, I don't know about you.
I agree. I think it's going to be the stylings of Misk, which is like the front. Like if you notice that all Misk ships have a rounded front. It's like a nice big like
a bubble cockpit.
Phallic.
Very phallic. I'm sorry, honey.
We can say that.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure. But yeah, it has that kind of that look to it. But it's a lot of smooth lines, and it has kind of more harsher edges, especially around like the wings and stuff. I expect that similar Misk design aesthetic to be matched with alien technology. So Xi'an thrusters, Xi'an aesthetics, anti-grav. We'll see like all that sort of thing. So it'll be almost, I dare hope that it would look something more like we'll start to see something like the Flight of the Navigator or the Last Starfighter in terms of those sorts of aesthetics. So.
Okay. Yeah, I think those engines could be a good sticking point, but you got a good point. Really, their thing could just be the fact that they design a ship and then there's alien tech involved and it's got an original look. That would probably mean that the ships themselves would end up being more unique and call for more work, but it'd be more interesting than them all just having the same thrusters.
I think we're also going to say we're not going to see large ships from Mirai. I think we'll see mostly small and medium ships from Mirai because it's just
Really?
it seems to be, yeah. Because I think it makes it more interesting for.
Oh man, I'm just thinking how a capital ship from these guys would sell like hotcakes because it's like, you know,
That'd take a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, but like it's such a cool concept. Like if you've got, like, I just want to chuck it out there, right? And I know that's not what they would do, but a Borg cube. You put a Borg cube, people would buy it because of that relation. So what I'm saying is, if you had something that's this alien human hybrid thing, and it's like the size of a Kraken or an Idris, I could see people wanting to buy that, like because of the style and the feel of it. I don't think they're limited by the shackles of size. I get what you mean though. I agree with you about everything from vehicles all the way along, but I think that's the best part of it. This is a unique style. We have not seen this style before. I think I don't know who it was, but someone's gone, hey, we've got all these alien ships. We've got all these human ships. Why the hell aren't we doing combinations? And like combinations is where it's at. I think that'd be really cool. And I hope there's another brand that comes that does it with the Banu. Well, I shouldn't say with, but you know, but
yeah,
you know what I mean, like hybridation.
I could see that for sure, but at the same time, I don't think we're going to see anything larger from most manufacturers than a large ship until they have a lot of the back back end done, so they can have more people per server.
I'll agree with that
because CIG seems to be very so like. We might see a Mirai large or, you know, dare to dream capital ship, but that will be so far in the future. Like we have no idea.
Not even worth thinking about.
No, and I think
I'm not saying. All I was saying is don't rule it out, but I do agree. Yeah, small ships would probably be the way to go. Maybe. Well, here's the other thing: Mirai, 10 years from now, they get some Vandal tech after the war.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. I can see that as well. You know, you as I said, Banu, like new Banu. Merchantman tech comes in or something like that. So they could just be the alien hybrid brand is what I'm trying to say. And I actually could see that as being really interesting. But
that's the whole
never
thing
say never with this.
That's the whole thing with Mirai. It's literally future. That's what it means. So it's I agree that we're probably going to see an aesthetic of more future hybrid experimental. And so I think that's where I really want to see a UFO in Star Citizen. I want to see a classic flying saucer in Star Citizen, and I don't think we're going to see it unless we had some sort of brand, because there's no brand that it works with.
They almost made the
Argo.
The Vulture. The
Vulture.
Yeah, one of the first concepts of the Vulture was like a saucer kind of thing.
Yeah,
it's very strange.
Actually, it was no, it wasn't. It was by Argo. It was Argo Mole that was the UFO, and it was Paul Jones that was really pushing for it before he left. But can I be honest? I actually think if you were actually going to get a manufacturer that could potentially pull off a UFO-like ship, it might be RSI, because they're a little bit Star Trek-y. If you detach the saucer section from the Enterprise, so to speak, you get your UFO. So maybe it's a ship that's not a UFO, but it's a UFO if it splits.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just a thought.
Well, that is the Mirai Fury. Now, let's move on to something that's a little bit less celebrated, I think, less popular. The RSI Lynx. This one's been a long time coming, and to be honest, we've known about it since the Constellation Phoenix was revealed, and never had any idea of what it should look like. Now it's coming out. It looks kind of like an Ursa. It's got a couple extra windows, some tables, schmooze. You got champagne. It's fancy, whatever. What do you guys think?
There's an unprecedented thing that they're doing with this Lynx. It's the first time I've ever seen them sell 2 new vehicles on the same day. I've never seen them, or 2 new ships or anything. I've just never seen that before. So I think they kind of secretly know, like, who's going to pay extra money to kind of downgrade your Ursa to a Lynx. I think that's a part of it. And why would you buy an Ursa when you can buy a Lynx? So I think that's a part of it as well. Like, so I don't know. You guys tell me. I know there are people that are really excited for the Lynx. They really want that luxury thing. I totally get that. But you've got to see that. I think CIG see that as well, because why would they sell 2 vehicles on the same day? Why would they step on each other like that?
I am curious as to what they're going for with the Lynx. Maybe they'll show us a trailer, but I'm sure the trailer will just be people riding around on moons and planets with champagne and nice views.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a luxury vehicle. I mean, that's I don't know how to say other than it's a nice vehicle. CAG like I could see this being valuable for mission creators, for narrative designs, to flesh out the universe a little bit more. But it's mostly just like the 890. Like the 890's job is to be absurdly posh. It's supposed to be wealthy and gaudy and supposed to be showing off wealth and that kind of thing. So like I think that's the same situation you're going to see with the Lynx. It's like it's mostly just a show of wealth for players, but also I don't like, maybe we'll see some value for it, but right now it's just an Ursa with it's all fancy. That's all.
It's a fat Ursa that looks like a coffin from above. Look, the other thing I'll put back in here, though, Space, too, is, and I know Paul will agree with me on this because we've talked about it in the past, so what I'm going to do is I'm not going to say what it is, Paul. I'm just going to ask him the question. What do you think about future Lynx variants?
Wouldn't that just be like Ursa variants?
I'm tricking you. I want to see your answer because Paul and I know what the answer is, but we just want to know what your answer is.
I don't know. I feel like a Lynx variant is just a Ursa.
Yeah, but what if you were going to make a variant? Would you make a variant of the one that everybody owns, or of the Lynx that then leapfrogs, so you have to go up in price even more?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and what would that variant be? You got any rough idea?
Cargo hauler.
I'll give you a clue. I'll give you a clue. Galaxy medical module.
Oh, an ambulance.
Yeah.
So
that has been.
So you tell him, Paul. You tell him, Paul. Yeah.
So the Galaxy medical module is big enough to fit a rover. It's big enough to fit an Ursa rover onto it, which means because it's got with the elevator, which means that CIG must be planning on doing some sort of ground-based medical ship, which we don't have. And for the longest time, a medical variant of the Ursa has always been like a thing that I thought is going to happen in some way, shape, or form, just because it makes sense. CIG wants to make it so that the universe is hard to navigate, that you won't be able to go to every place because of storms or other issues. You won't be able to fly your Apollo or your C8R, directly to a place where someone's hurt and then pull them in. You may have to drive a vehicle in, pull them into the vehicle, and get them out. So
they've also widened it quite considerably, and if you've looked at the files that were shown of it, you'll see it when it comes out next week or whatever. But if you actually replace kind of where the seats are and put a bed there, where the champagne area is and the storage and stuff, you can clearly take what's in the C8R and it would fit in that Ursa.
Yeah, I'm sure.
To the point that I almost think they did them at the same time. They've gone, all right, we can do the C8R and we can do a vehicle, and what works in both. I think they've almost done that. So
yeah. I could see that. So overall, the Lynx is not adding anything particularly useful right now, but could be something in the future, which is the story with a lot of stuff.
It might be more than just medical too. Like think about all the vehicles you could get off that frame.
Yeah, they could spread this out quite a bit. It's similar to other ground vehicles, I guess, really, is that they could just make a chassis that changes out. But I don't know about it. How do you guys feel about the fact that it is marking one off the backlog, the ship backlog that people?
That's nice, at least.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want me to get on my soapbox about the X1 and about how CIG is.
No one cares, Paul.
For the Ranger.
No one cares, Paul.
Well, at least the Ranger, like they're kind of redoing like wheel tech, and they're trying to. It makes a lot of sense to like wait until they've got that whole rework of like how vehicles work on ground and wheels and stuff like that. We've been seeing that in the monthly reports. They even showed it off, I think, in an SCL recently, or no, ISC.
They did. It was in the background of ISC.
Yeah. So like there's definitely like they're working on it. So I understand like wanting to make sure that the Ranger works when it comes out. But like the hover tech, that's been out for a while, and I'm not going on that big thing, but it's nice to see at least something get put out, which is in the backlog to knock one down. For sure.
Yeah, that's something. But yeah, the X1 is annoying. It sounds like they're working on it right now, so at least we might get it this year too.
I hope.
Yep.
I hope.
All right, we got one more vehicle coming. Huh.
I was just going to say real quick, it probably does fall in a very similar background as the Lynx now I think about it, both luxury. So there might be something. Maybe.
Maybe. We got one more vehicle coming to Invictus week, and I don't think anybody really was expecting this. Was this something that they had done, like the questionnaire at CitizenCon, or was there any reason for people to believe a year ago that we were getting another tank?
It's the Scorpion tank from Halo, is it not, Space Tomato?
It gives me kind of Command and Conquer vibes, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I've heard the Scorpion tank from Halo. My favorite one, though, is it's the Batman Tumbler. So it's the Tumbril Tumbler.
And what day is Tumbril on this week?
Same day as Lynx. It's on RSI. It's
Same as
basically
RSI.
the everything day. Like, there's a whole bunch of them. There's like 6 or 7. I can't even remember which ones are coming anymore.
Do you guys know what day that is? It's
Look
Thursday?
it up. Thursday?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, well,
So
this will be a little preview for this this tank, since we don't know the official details, but we have seen it in a trailer. There's some official pictures going around. This is like a small combat tank. I mean, given the name Storm, kind of gives you the vibe. What do you guys think of it?
So I had a chance to look at the 3D models for this thing, and I'm not the only one. I've talked to Grim that also looked at them from Star Jump. It is a one-person tank. This is from the description on the showroom floor that's taken from the files. It is a one-person tank, but it is actually, if you think about the way tank tracks work, the tank tracks are the same as the Novus tank tracks. So the running theory is it's still quite a large tank, but it's a much faster tank, and it's only designed for one person. Right. It has a bespoke gun on it that is like this. It looks like an energy-based weapon, and we think that's where the Storm might come from. The name of it. What I'm talking about here is all speculation. But I do want to just want to preface that so people are not. But the gun is bespoke because it has in the model there is a thing off the side that's attached to it. So having something that's beside it attached to it very much means that gun most likely doesn't change. And we think the Storm, again, electricity, the Storm, you can see it's some form of lightning gun or something like that. And again, that kind of defers that it's probably more likely short range. So this thing gets up really close. And it does say this in its description that it's designed to get behind the back line and get up on artillery. So ironically, in that description, it also confirms that later on we're getting artillery. So you get up in the back line, and because it's like a distortion lightning gun, it just does damage to the components and goes through the shields and stuff like that. So it's designed to do a lot of damage. It's almost like scatter guns, but in lightning form. You're getting up really close, really quickly, doing a lot of damage and getting out. So it's a hit and run tactic, similar to, as I said, scatter guns or something like, say, a Polaris, which is a first strike craft that gets in there, hits, and then gets out. It's weak itself, but it's designed to get in, punch, and get out. And it being like the Batman Tumbril, I actually think they've possibly copied the animations from the Vandal. So you know how you lie down in it? I think you might lie down in this because it's not high enough for someone to stand or sit in properly. So I think from what I've seen of it, it looks like the cab where the gun is on slides back, and then I think you step in and lie down, much like in the Batmobile. Well, also the Batmobile. Like once you see the Batman Tumbler, you cannot unsee this being a Tumbler. It just looks so much like the Batman vehicle. First strike, because of the first look, the head looks like the Scorpion tank. But then when you realize it's so much smaller, it looks like the Scorpion tank from Halo, but smaller. It just becomes a Batman Tumbler. Whoever made it is seriously a fan of the Batman Tumbler from the Dark Knight trilogy. And I really like. Well, we're getting the X-wing. We're getting a TIE fighter now. We're getting Batman. What's next? Wonder Woman's invisible jet. What was that? What was that 400i? You remember the 400i was invisible?
Yeah, that's 404. Yeah. Who doesn't like some
Wonder
Batman?
Woman's invisible jet. Yeah. So, what else can we squeeze in there?
Well, Astropub, what do you think?
I kind of hate it. Like, I don't like the aesthetic. It doesn't fit well with the Nova. I think it's we know what we know from what was been leaked and all of that stuff is that it is a small light tank designed to fight artillery and also just kind of lighter, be more mobile and such. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think this is true. I don't think this is actually what's going to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was remote, because I don't think it's going to be sold or available to drive. I wouldn't, because they've been working on remote.
It's a concept.
Piloting.
It's a concept.
Yeah,
it's definitely a concept. It's not flight.
Yeah, they've been working on remote piloting for Squadron 42. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's a Squadron 42 vehicle or something they wanted to add to Squadron 42, because it adds and makes like possibly made as a level thing. Like, hey, let's make a cool little thing where you can go off and do this, and B, make it a remote so you could, don't have to be. So that's just theory crafting at my point. But from what I can see, I think it'll be a decent vehicle that is, generally speaking, like all vehicles, not really worth it. But yeah, I don't think we're going to see like electric shooting from this thing. I just think its storm is in like storming the beaches, storming the battlefield.
Yeah, could be that too entirely. I just want to add though, from the files and my talking with Grim, it looks like this is not a small tech. I just want to point that out. I don't know if I made that clear before. It is roughly the same size as the Nova, so that actually makes it a large vehicle. So only thing that could carry this at the moment is the Hercules. So it will, though, possibly more likely fit in the Valkyrie because it's lower down than the Ballista and that. So it does go into some other vehicles, but it is still technically a large vehicle. It's just a lot lower. But I was hoping it was going to be Ursa size, but it looks like it's actually bigger than that because, again, as I said, the tank tracks perfectly line up in the scale that it sits with the Nova. And if you think about how tanks work, how Humvees were designed to drive in the tank tracks of tanks. So it makes sense that all tanks have the same size width.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping I was hoping I was right, but when I talked to Grim was like, no, the scale should be correct, and if he is correct in that regard, then yeah, this is unfortunately a large vehicle, not a medium.
And what do you guys think about the way that ground gameplay is kind of being fleshed out with tanks? Apparently now they're talking about artillery, and plenty of other things like missile launchers on the ground, like the Cyclone MT. You've got radars that are on vehicles. We're going to see a bike. Like, how do you feel about the ground gameplay scene?
When I interviewed Chris, he was a massive fan of Battlefield. I don't expect anything less than Battlefield.
Permadeath Battlefield.
Yeah. Or temporary respawning extra things. That's one of the things I've talked about before. So if you're in the military will provide the respawns for you. At their cost or whatever, and it's got special tech that allows you to come back more frequently or some shit, like it's prepared for you to die multiple times or some shit. I'll make up some lore reason.
I think CIG needs to really nail ground gameplay, because since they've decided to move away from being a pure space and light FPS, back when they got planetary landings done. They've attracted a lot of attention from people who play games like Tarkov and Battlefield and Arma. And I think that gameplay needs a lot of work. I think right now it is not in a good place. And I think we won't see it in a better place until they can get AI working the way they want them to. Because I know, Tomato, you read the monthly reports and such, so you've probably seen the same thing I have, which is like they are really working on AI. On everything from the AI driving vehicles to flying ships, to being able to target vehicles and ships, and using different weapons and specialties. Like, there's a lot of stuff that they seem to have just cracked open with now that they've got the basic system done, they're just really quickly adding complexity to it. But we won't see that until 4.0. So sadly, I think we're not going to really see a ground sort of gameplay with vehicles and being, a combined arms gameplay and any kind of, even just for like industrial stuff until after 4.0. So
do you remember when we had Level Cup come on Inforunners and for that episode Space, and he brought up that thing about different planets doing different game modes? Do you remember that? Because that's what I was instantly thinking of when Paul said what he said. So you could have a planet or a scenario on a planet, even in a certain area, where that whole game mode is Hunt Showdown, Tarkov, and then you go to another planet or another area, and it could even be a dynamic event that turns off and on, so that's Hunt Showdown, Tarkov, and then another one over here is PUBG, another one over here is like Fortnite. So you can have every single first-person shooter trope you can possibly imagine, and they're all different events. I can so see that as a thing,
sure.
and that's a draw. That's a draw card into every single type of game out there. And when he said that, it just I hadn't thought of it, and it just blew my mind when he brought it up. And I haven't been able to let it go because I think it's real, and I think it will happen. It'll take time, but like you have some big craze come up like Battle Royale, they can just copy that and put it into Star Citizen.
Yeah,
next
I
one comes
wonder.
up, it's in.
I wonder if one of those planets would be called Theaters of War.
Theaters of where? I still
that's a good one. I like that.
I still have my firm belief that Theaters of War is going to be released this year. And when I say that, I mean I want to hear in the comments below if you and in the comments in the podcast or in YouTube why you think I'm wrong. But I think the reality is because I actually think I am wrong with that one. But I'm making that bold statement mostly because I believe that there is something that the Arena Commander team is doing behind the scenes that we have yet to see, which has got to be what has happened, what has come from Theaters of War. Because I don't think Theaters of War exists anymore. I think it's going to, if it's evolved like a lot of other things, into something different. Because now that they have a dedicated team doing Arena Commander, there's going to be a lot more to do with that team. They just got to get all the basic stuff done, like logging into the game, customizing your ships. All that stuff needs to get fixed before they can get into the more detailed stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You thinking Citizen? Sorry, you thinking CitizenCon poll for something like that? Or?
Oh yeah, they'll definitely make an announcement on that around CitizenCon.
They've been talking about stuff in the monthly report.
A secret thing that they don't want to talk about. They've been like, "Oh, we're working on something secret."
Yeah.
Well, there are a lot of vehicles coming too, unannounced vehicles on the roadmap. That would make a lot of sense to line up with that, give you that Battlefield, style. So that makes a lot of sense.
Again, going back to the vehicles, artillery is a big deal. Tanks are a big deal. These are heavy weapons. This isn't like small arms. People are going to die a lot with ground gameplay and assaulting bases. Do you think that Death of a Spaceman is going to have to compensate a lot for this? Like boost up the number of lives you can have for each of those big lives and maybe give you perks that allow you to avoid using one of those? Or do you think they're going to stick to the hardcore? You've got like 5 to 8 deaths and then you're done.
Oh, they're definitely not going to be 5 to 8 deaths. We're going to see a much longer spree. I don't think we're going to see that hardcore. But I don't think CIG's ever really been hard committal on. You only have this many deaths because they themselves knew that they're probably going to have to wiggle a little bit.
That was also back then. They didn't have all the first-person shooter stuff, did they? So it's gone, as I said earlier, it's gone from a space game to a bit of an everything game. So yeah, they're going to have areas where it's flexible. Yeah.
And I think the key is that I think there's twofold. One, I think a lot of this stuff is going to be focused on Arena Commander or the kind of more place where you can try and play it out and kind of do that more fun kind of instant respawn situation. And then the stuff in game is going to have more oomph, more punch, because the other problem about making respawn just kind of a mechanic is it loses its value. If you go to a planet, say in Pyro, say you're working with I don't know, the headhunters, and you're trying to take out a fire rat's outpost as part of a mission so you can get more rep and money, and you go in and you assault and you just get wiped, you just get destroyed because you weren't prepared for it. If you could just respawn 15 kilometers away and just be like, well, let's do that now that we know what they're at, let's go again and do fine, and like no consequences, then the people will play that way. And CIG doesn't want that to happen. They want players to be careful. They want players to have pain when that sort of thing happens. So I think what we're more likely going to see going forward, and this is kind of connected to that Mirai discussion, is you're going to have to make choices which matter. It will sting, but it won't ruin your game. Like, it'll sting to the point where if you've not planned properly, you don't have a respawn bed nearby, then you're going to lose a lot of progression because you didn't prepare for that more ambitious gameplay. But if you're in like Stanton, whatever, like it's not going to matter as much because you're like 20 minutes away and you can gather everything up. It's annoying, sure, but it's not as detrimental.
Yeah,
you could I want to put this to you, Space, because you're a big kind of first-person shooter player as well. But like, I also think of the insurance system. They could have like the different levels of insurances, like dictate how many times you can respawn. So whoever's doing the mission for you, they kind of cover your insurance costs. So if you're going into a first-person shooter environment, they cover it. Like they're just like, oh yeah, we're just going to blanket cover, every single respawn for this whole round, and the round goes for an hour.
Yeah, that could be cool.
Yeah.
Life insurance, that's the next step in the actor feature team's status system. So we'll see if they do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. Well, and what about the game modes thing I talked about before, though? Because did you see that as a thing too? Like being able to bring in Halo and...
Yeah.
Does that appeal to you?
I mean, I think it will appeal to casual players. It's the kind of thoughts we had behind Star Marine and Arena Commander in the first place. So yeah, I think it's possible. And they've got their own game engine. They can do whatever they've got enough people to do. So we'll see. Yeah. So overall, 3 new vehicles, several ship sales, Invictus week as it normally is. They've released the trailer, I think, for it. Overall, let's talk stability, the ship sales, the trailer and kind of theme they've been going for. What do you guys think of this year's Invictus week?
It seems less ambitious, if that makes sense. But I don't think it's bad. I just think it's more of it's less of a
it's reading between the lines, Paul, is what it is.
It's overall it feels like they're trying to do the best they can with Invictus while also trying to emphasize the game more. Because in the past, Invictus was just the IAE, but with military ships. It was IAE because they wanted to make another sale so it could make more money. And, it works. This one doesn't feel like that because, what do we have for sales? We have the Fury and we have the Storm. And so that means
the Lynx,
and the Lynx, that means that they're focusing more on the game. The game is more important this than it has in the past, which is a disadvantage and an advantage, because disadvantage is that it's not that good yet, and it still has lots of problems, but it's a lot better than it was last year. And while there are still some unredeemable bugs, like I've heard Jack Axton, who's a big Star Citizen content creator, both of you. He's been on both of the Inforunners and I know on your show. He's locked out of the game entirely.
Yeah.
He's got a 1900 error. He can't play the game. He basically said at one point, he's like, well, I guess I'll come back in 320. And the problem is 320 is October.
Yeah.
So when you have that sort of situation where CIG is, and I know we're saying this because he's a content creator and it's bad for content creators, but if Jack Axton is having that problem, it means that more average players are having that problem.
I've had more people contact me with problems over 318, 319, I think, than I have in the last couple of years.
Yeah. So the game is in a better position than it was, but it's also in a worse position because it's just so roll of the dice. You don't even know if a player can even play the game. And that's a worse feels bad than bugs, in my opinion. Because if it's a bug happen, you go, whatever, it's a bug. And even I've heard a lot of people who are like, my friend can't play it because they just get terrible frame rate issues. And I don't understand why, because I don't have any frame rate issues. That's like they don't have the equipment. For the first time in Star Citizen's history, your equipment matters, what you have in your rig. And so it's this weird balance where the game is a fun game, but it's also
I found some weird things, Paul, though. So I ran into a couple of people, and it turns out that they had not updated their Windows properly. Right, so they there were people that upgraded from Windows 10 to Windows 11, and they didn't do a fresh reformat, things like that. So it's showing flaws in people's maintenance of their PCs, but it is a very high-end game, So that's a bit. Sorry to kind of interrupt there, but I thought it was just important to say that because there are exceptions to the rule.
Yeah, equipment matters. Finally.
Yeah.
I think to go back to where you were talking about the actual sale, the one thing I would say, and I did say this to you guys before the show, that you really have to kind of let it sink in, is of the new vehicles, this is the first time we've never had a real ship. There's not a single ship with a quantum drive for sale. I've never seen that before. And that is really kind of bizarre to me. It's an all-vehicle snub affair, which is really weird. And it seems kind of negative to put it like that, but I think it's really obvious that they're knuckling down behind the scenes on Squadron 42, as you kind of alluded to, Paul. I don't know, Space, what's your take on that?
Well, I mean, it does. I think that just spawns more questions. Like, why are they taking it so easy?
Mm-hmm. Because they don't have enough stuff to get shit done. So it's all hands on deck.
Well, you guys had another theory about the involvement of Squadron 42.
Yeah. So one of the things that's important to note is something that I've noticed, and I'll admit this is tinfoil hat territory. This is no confirmation. CIG has said nothing of the sort. But it's something that a lot of content creators have picked up on, which is CIG, something's going on with Squadron 42. Something that hasn't happened quite the same way for a while, which is most of the game chapters now have full-time staff attached to them. Before they were part-time staff. Now, it's hard to tell because part-time could mean they're working on, Squadron 42 half and half. It could mean that they're working on Squadron 42 mostly, but they're also working on Star Citizen stuff. But, that doesn't really matter anymore because now it's people who are dedicated to just Squadron 42 stuff, which is an interesting change from this sort of part-time approach to it. And this started happening in October. And the theory that X has, and I'll let X kind of talk about this a little bit more, makes sense in the sense of what are you going to do when you're really trying to push out a game like Squadron? Is you need to have as little work as possible to do for the other teams where you can. Obviously, they can't cut down on gameplay aspects and other things and they aren't. If you look at the monthly reports and if you look at the progress tracker, they are full speed ahead on bounty hunting, on an overhaul for commodity trading with the whole sea coming out, the even salvage, trying to finish off that salvage loop with hull munching in there, multi-crew gameplay, resource gameplay. They are like just chugging straight into gameplay aspects and gameplay loops for Star Citizen. So if they can't pull away people from that, they have to find other places where they can pull away, QA developers. Because it's not really developers, it's like QA and it's programmers and those kind of things.
What you're describing is also shown in the monthly reports, which is polished. There is a shit ton of polishing going on, so art assets are being polished up, gold passes are being done. And like I said about, look at the bad connotations of Invictus. There's, 2 vehicles and a snub. It's kind of an all non-ship affair because they're all low-hanging fruit. They're things that they can kind of be done by 1 or 2 people at most. So if they lower the requirements, they can move those ships people over to polish other art assets.
Yeah,
that's kind of my theory.
One of the primary guys on the Fury is his first ship.
Mm-hmm.
Probably his onboarding project.
Yep, yeah. 100%. That tin can is probably what it'll get called down in the future. I need some kind of name that's not Fury because it's definitely not Furious. If they don't put a beer brand in game called Fury, I will write. But yeah, it's just a tin can. Long story short, getting back to the whole theory thing is I just think that it is clear from the monthly report. I don't know, you guys read it, you tell me as well. I read it as well, but they're doing a shit ton of polishing. You know how you said you're alluding to something's happening with Squadron 42? They are polishing like crazy. They're getting ready for something. You look at the end of a lot of the chapters wrapped up. They said the game was playable from go to woe. They're taking longer than most games to polish, though. They're going to take 2 years to polish it. You read things like the monthly report where he talked about Cyberpunk. He doesn't want to repeat of that. How do you do that? You take way longer to polish than you should.
We will. We'll see. I'm always going to be skeptical about where Squadron 42 or how close it might be is until probably it's like the marketing push has begun. Yeah.
I'm with you on that one, and that's probably my biggest pause right now is that I think a lot of people think that the Squadron 42 is going to be announced at CitizenCon, and because of that, I'm always afraid that that's hopium, that CIG, because CIG is not indicated this at all entirely.
Hey, Paul, it's got it this far. It's got us this far, Paul. Come on, we've got 10 years ago, man.
People are seeing signs like it being physical again, which makes sense since COVID has passed quite a bit and it's a little more safe to do that. And things like that, they're excited about the CitizenCon and assuming that means a Squadron 42 announcement. But honestly, I think they're just excited to be back in person, and they're going to focus a lot on 4.0. That's going to be the big thing that they need to push at CitizenCon, which everybody's going to hate.
Yes, because it's going to be the 4th year in a row they talked about Pyro and no one cares.
But this time they should have actual missions and the real gameplay that we should be looking at.
Yeah.
So I think most of the Pyro stuff was because of COVID, but I want to put this to you too. You know how they haven't sold tickets to CitizenCon? Like almost like there's no limit of the people that can turn up?
Well, they usually wait until May, right?
Yeah, but they usually...
before COVID, they were trying to sell them in February.
That's true. But they also didn't announce it until February, which is difficult to do. This time they announced it in December, which So there's definitely something going with Squadron 42. It may have something to do with the lack of ships in Invictus, and we may see an announcement. But what I'll say is, don't take any of this. That's why I say it's tinfoil hat territory. Don't take any of this. If anybody tells you that Squadron 42 is 100% going to be announced at CitizenCon, they have no idea what they're talking about.
No,
we don't know that. It's best guesses, and we won't know until CitizenCon happens. So don't set yourself up for disappointment by saying CitizenCon is Squadron 42
and quote him on that.
It's a fingers cross hope thing. Literally,
but we know that there's something going on with there's got to be something going on with why they're only doing non-quantumable ships, because as X said, this is the first time we've had a snub fighter and 2 ground vehicles for and we're having much more ground vehicles on the monthly report too. So
you can also even go back to AIE, because that was the smallest ship they've ever kind of sold as the big ship of the year. The $380 ship is the smallest ship they've ever had. So I think it's kind of ramping up. And also the, I guess you can bring Alien Week into Invictus here, the Sulian. We don't know how big exactly that's going to be, but like if it's let's say it's, I'm not saying it will be, but let's say it's a large ship, right? That's because it's a concept. They can actually kick that down the road 2 years. So that's after potentially Squadron 42 is out, so it makes it safer. So
all right, is there anything else going on in the game with Star Citizen's development, gameplay, maybe what's going on YouTube or in the streams that you guys have noticed that's interesting?
I don't want to say another will it fit in this video for the Fury.
I will say that the surprising thing is the mining. Like if you've been away from Star Citizen for a long time, you're just watching this, or if you're really trying to get into Star Citizen, the mining has completely changed. They flipped mining on its head, and it's a very exciting realization, because if they decided, because before this they said, we're done, we're not going to do mining anymore, like we're not going to work on mining anymore, we're finished, we're in a good place. And then a year later they're like, we saw some problems, so we fixed it. And to me that indicates that CIG is no longer in a we need to get this out, push it out, and then move on to the next section. They're getting to the point where they're like, we need to look at what we've done, fix what we've done, and ensure that the next time we release something, it's good when it first drops, or shortly thereafter with small tweaks, not just abandon it for 3 years and then try to fix it later, because then they realize this causes all the sorts of problems. So that's a pretty cool aspect.
If mining had tiers, where would you say it's at?
In terms of
47. It's about this. It's about this far in. I'll give you no context. It's this far in.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we don't know how many tiers there would be, but where do you consider there to be significant upgrades? How many do you think there have been to the profession?
I think we're probably on tier 3 or tier 4. of
Yeah.
mining at this point. I don't think we're close to final. I mean, we'll never get close. Never get final. But I think we are.
I can tell you the two big tiers left, though, if you want to know those.
What's that? Oh, gas mining.
Well, you've got,
and grab mining.
Well, that's one of them. Yeah. So the first one would be, I think that we're probably going to see next. Potentially could be gas is one of them. The other one I was going to say is obviously the Orion. It needs much bigger rocks. The mole needs much bigger rocks, so they'll probably do those two at the same time. But the really complicated one that I think is going to come at the end, and if I'm just talking just ground mining or mining, is the underground stuff, and that'll come with that new RSI miner that was announced at the end of last year. So I think that's a couple of years away though, but we'll see. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to perfectly lay it out because we don't quite know if gas is going to have that underground thing yet. But if it does, you know, we've only seen half mining if that's the case, because we're going to get all this solid ore stuff, and now we've got all this gas stuff to come. And we know gas mining's a thing because the Starfarer is in there. You know, it can scoop up gas. So it's just whether you can do it from geysers underground as well, or is it just a space-based affair?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot left to go, because if CIG is given infinite time and infinite money, I can almost guarantee you we'll see CIG do some sort of reformation with the ground so that you can actually mine it, like say Minecraft or Deep Rock Galactic or anything like that. They already use voxel-based systems for most of their resources, so you know that's it's possible. But I think
they could even have two. They could even have two systems. If you think about it, you could go into caves and you can mine out the cave, which is from a developer perspective a lot easier, because then you're not stuffing with the surface of the planets. But then you could also have it so that you kind of create a tunnel and it procedurally generates a kind of bubble that you go into. So yeah, there's so many ways they can go about it, and it's like, as you said, it's how far they want to take it. It's their game engine. It's where they want to go with it.
Yeah. But I think we're realistically, before we see a CIG going, that's good enough. I think it's about, you're right, about maybe one or two, which is the large scale mining, and then like gas mining.
Okay. That'll be cool to see.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. As always, I'd like to give you the chance to let everybody know where they can find your content. So execute, start us off.
He's going to make me do it.
Usually do. No, I'll try and do it this time. So on youtube.com/infrunners, we cover everything, especially like an Invictus and AIE. There are big periods because we kind of give a lot of financial advice on ships, how to save you a lot of money, and things like that. But we also try to tailor ships specifically to people's needs. And then we kind of do deep dive discussions, kind of a little bit like what we did here, like, you know, a little bit of theory crafting and things like that, and try and figure out what's going on with the game so people can be better prepared for what's coming up. I think that kind of covers it.
Cool.
I don't know.
Thank you.
Is that good enough?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
If you want to follow the development of Star Citizen and gameplay and stuff like that, I stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/theastropub and youtube.com/theastropub live. I do videos there as well, and Q&As and stuff. But if you're like me and you enjoy the lore, the story, the narrative behind the game, you can follow me at youtube.com/TheAstroHistorian, which is where I do all my lore stuff. Yeah, I had to split it up because YouTube doesn't like when you do both those things at once. It doesn't know what to do with it. So,
yep. Got my own two channels, Space Tomato and Space Tomato 2. Obviously, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're seeing this on Space Tomato 2. But if you're listening on audio platforms, feel free to join us on the video. Our faces are very expressionful, so there's a lot more to see. But if you don't like ads on YouTube, the audio platform is ad-free. So supported by our supporters who get to watch this live. Thank you so much to them. Thank you to you guys for joining me. And
thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for everybody for watching. See you next week.